So the reason you'd go to a market is to understand the industry, the landscape of the industry. So what about film markets as opposed to festivals? There's probably a dozen markets, major markets around the world for films every year. The biggest ones would be Marché du Film. In addition to Cannes having a film festival, they also have a film market. The American film market is a big market. The European film market. A market is a place where buyers and sellers go. The sellers obviously go to sell the films and the buyers come to buy them. And they're called markets because they take place usually in a building, and sellers have these booths and buyers come and walk around and have meetings and say, okay, what do you got today? What's new? What's exciting? What can we buy for our streaming platform or our television station or, our theaters or whatever the case they're buying for. Big difference between markets and festivals is markets are generally not open to the public. A festival, they're encouraging the public to come and watch the films. In a market, they're only encouraging industry people to come, buyers and sellers, if you're involved in the industry. There's a huge difference in price. To attend a market, you're going to spend $500, $600, $700, maybe well over $1,000 as an attendee. If you're a seller and you're going to get a booth, it's going to be tens of thousands of dollars. Whereas in a festival, the only cost to attend is the ticket price of what if you're coming to screen a movie, and whatever travel you have to get to that festival. So if you're a filmmaker, your travel expenses. Markets are for the industry and festivals are really for the viewing public. In a lot of cases, a festival and a market happen at the same time. Toronto has a gigantic film festival called the TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, and at the same time they have a market. Now, a lot of people who go to the Toronto International Film Festival don't even know they have a market because that's the viewing public. They only go because they think of it as a festival. But a lot of the industry goes because they want to meet with other distributors and or producers, blah, 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 and just do some business together. Okay, now there are some markets that are primarily only markets, like the American film market in Los Angeles. There are some screenings that go around, for public. For the most part, it's an industry event, and there's not really a big festival attached to it. So the reason you'd go to a market, there's various reasons if you're an independent film producer, is to understand the industry, the landscape of the industry. Because at a market, you're going to see mostly distributors. You're going to get sort of a feel for what the landscape is going on just by walking around a market, what people are selling, kind of what their posters look like, what they're showing, what they're talking about. Also, if you're lucky, you might meet some industry buyers, people who are looking for new product. Going to a market gives you a flavor for what's going on in the industry before you make your film. After you make your film, if you want to try to go to a market to sell it, it's a little trickier. You don't just show up at a market and you have, a screening link for your film and you walk around and you think, oh, you're going to run into a Netflix buyer. It just doesn't happen that way. First of all, you have to have appointments when you go to a market. Generally speaking, the people who are buying only want to speak to the people who are registered sellers. Imagine, I'll explain the American film market. So it takes place in a hotel in Santa Monica. They basically, every room in the hotel, they take the furniture out and they put in office furniture. So they're converting it into an office building, let's say. Each of the sellers take a suite. And in that suite, they have a meeting table or a couple of meeting tables, and they have some posters of what they're selling. There's hundreds and hundreds of these sellers. Then the buyers, they're walking around the hotel. They are going to go into these suites and they're going to say, hey, I buy for Japan and I run a streaming platform there and I'm looking for the following type of content. What do you got? There's a discussion and potentially the seller sells the Japanese buyer a couple of series or a movie or whatever the case may be. That's the theory behind a market, right? Buyer meets seller. It doesn't quite happen exactly like that. The buyers need to make lots of appointments, or the sellers generally will make appointments with the buyers because they want to meet the buyers. And they say, hey, come meet with us on Tuesday at 3 p.m. in our suite and we'll have an appointment. So most of it is done by appointment. So if you're an independent filmmaker showing up at a market, make sure you have appointments. Otherwise, you're not going to fit into their schedules. They're not going to want to speak to you because they don't have time to speak to you. So you've got to get onto their schedules if you want to talk to them. If you're going to a market to sell a movie, chances are you're not selling it to an end buyer like a streaming platform, because they're not the ones that take the suites. The distributors take the suites. Those are the people who are selling to, say, the streaming platforms. So chances are you as an independent filmmaker, you're going to try to sell to a distributor. Generally at the beginning, the first few days of a markets usually are anywhere from, say, 4 to 7 days. The first 1 or 2 days, the distributors don't want to talk to indie film producers because they just basically want to sell. And they want to get the buyers as quickly as possible, so they don't want to miss that opportunity. In the last couple of days, they're generally open to meeting with new producers who have new films because they need new product always. And, they're more receptive at that time in the market. If you're an indie filmmaker and you want to meet with them, make sure you have appointments. When you register, you get access to a list, the registration list. So now you know exactly who's attending, and you have the contact information of all these people. So you don't have to go source it elsewhere. One of the beautiful things of being registered to market is you get contact information for the industry. And that in itself is almost worth it. So then you reach out and you contact these people. You try to fill your schedule up and have as many meetings as possible. And then that could be a fruitful way to attend a market and try to get representation from a distributor. Now, in addition to that, there are generally lots of seminars and workshops at marketplaces, so you can learn a lot of different things. So you might want to attend some of those because they're interesting and they generally have pretty good speakers. And then there is networking and socializing. If you're good at that and you like to hang out in some of the bars or the lobbies of the hotels, or potentially you get invited to the parties, which is a whole other thing. You got to figure out how to get into that scene. That's where the networking happens, and you can meet people organically without appointments. You're at a party, you're both at the bar together. Hey, who are you? Who do you work for? Let's have a discussion. You got to be there in order for that to happen. If you're sitting at your home, in another country, and you're not at a market, you're not going to have this organic meeting networking. Now, I'm not saying if you actually go to the market, that's going to happen, but at least you have a shot at it happening. The last piece of advice I have for going to a market is, if you've never been to one before, it could be a very daunting, overwhelming experience, especially as a filmmaker who is very focused on the creative side of the business. It's all business at markets. It's just money and deals and this, and it's not like a film festival where people want to talk about the crafting of the film and the beautiful way it was shot and, and the acting and the directing. There's very little of that talk at markets. It's mostly who's the audience, what's this worth, how much are we going to pay, what are the rights. So it can be a little bit overwhelming for a filmmaker who's not used to that kind of talk. Also, there's so much activity and chaos and busyness going on. So sometimes you can get a little bit intimidated by that if you're going for the first time. So here's my advice. If possible, go with someone else the first time. I'd say go every time with someone else, because you need moral support. You need somebody to download with. You need somebody to go to parties with. You need a wing person. You just need somebody who just can be moral support to you, so that when you're overwhelmed by this experience, or you've been rejected by, certain people, or, it's just the film industry can be nasty. It just makes it for a better experience, especially if you're with another filmmaker. You could go with, a spouse, a friend, a companion, whatever, just anybody who's good moral support. But if you go with another filmmaker, then chances are you will, be in it together, you'll be integrated, and you'll be able to share the experience and hopefully support each other morally, and, hopefully business-wise, give each other advice, that type of thing. So the first time or the first few times you go to a market, I suggest go with someone else.